Yeah. I did both. Went out, stuff like that. Some hours. All right. Okay, moving along. So the exams will be graded probably by this evening sometime, so look out for that. And then discussion number 3, try to get your replies in as soon as possible. So you get full points. Then, and we'll have another discussion on maybe tomorrow, so look out for that. All right, so we're going to talk today about learning and conditioning, right? The various ways in which human beings learn, maybe the reasons why they learn in the way that they do. And we kind of want to understand the deeper meaning behind conditioning, right? Because what we'll talk about it is that we are kind of conditioned in ways that makes us follow certain patterns of behaviors. And that involves learning, whether it be a new concept, a new definition, something that you can apply to your life that alters your behavior and helps you grow, adapt, right? So we'll look at some of the theories behind learning. So, right, learning theories and some other ideas associated with those, classical conditioning and outward conditioning, associative learning, and observational modeling. So, but for the most part today, we'll talk about classical conditioning. Who here remembers Pavlov's dog? Anyone ever heard of Pavlov's dog? The story behind it. Okay, so I can't mention this like first week of class. Right? We say, hey, so the famous physiologist, Russian physiologist, actually won a Nobel Prize. I believe she's one of the first Russians to win a Nobel Prize. Right? So there's a physiologist, not a psychologist. And Pavlov had a laboratory, and he was studying digestive systems of dogs. Right? And he would hook up these contraptions inside of the dog's cheeks to the salivating glands. So you touch with your tongue inside of your cheek, you lift up your little glands and have little holes in them, and they help keeps the mouth moist and saliva breaks down and stuff. Right? So again, these kind of tubes hooked up to measure saliva, right? The production of saliva. And in this laboratory, obviously there were doors inside, some little contraptions, and they needed to feed the dogs, right? So either him or people who work in the laboratory would come out and bring the food to the dog. But what happened is maybe there was like a door, right? And that door had a bell. So whenever somebody would come into the area where the dog was, they would hit that bell and bring the food, right? What they started to notice is that over time, even if they did not bring food, the dog started to salivate a lot more just from the sound of the bell. Right? Like it's responding in a way to some sort of stimulus, because the bell doesn't mean anything. The bell's just a sound until we give it meaning. Right? The bell doesn't mean anything until it means something. Right? Like, how do you give it meaning? Right? How do you reinforce or condition in your mind like a computer program? How do you make that happen? So the dog kind of took it upon his own volition to say, well, in my mind, I associate the bell with food. So now my body physically responds in a way from the sound of the bell as if I'm anticipating getting food. But like if the food is not coming, then what happens? Well, maybe over time, then the dog responds less if food doesn't come out. So you're like, once again, this is interesting because wait, if we consistently bring food while hitting the bell, will reinforce the saliva, will reinforce the dog responding in some way. And if we stop bringing food, but we still keep hitting the bell, the dog eventually will stop responding to it slowly. So like, that's interesting. We can control behavior. Behavior can be controlled, or learning can happen, right? Dog learns that something's related to this versus that. And then it may be unlearned because we find that there's not a actual positive reinforcement from it. So that's kind But we think about that, that's kind of the first concept on how we learn. That's kind of one theory, right? The other one is the operant condition, which we'll talk about on Thursday. And operant condition kind of follows the premise that all human beings' behaviors move towards positive reinforcement or reward, right? And if you can manipulate the variables of the rewards, you can manipulate people's behavior. So people show up to college, why? The reward of a degree, potentially. Okay? And with the degree, like there could be other rewards, such as a career, money, maybe status, maybe self-worth, self-esteem, blah, blah, blah. But you're like, well, okay, not everybody, you gotta give people a positive reward in between the degree. Most people are not gonna show up to college. What do? Well, you give them assignments. You give them stuff to do so that they can get a grade. And that grade is an A. You feel, wow, you tell people about it. It's gonna make you wanna do more, get more A's. Right? Get your report card. Yay, let's go celebrate. Don't you feel smart, great about yourself? So you will follow that pattern of behavior. Now, if you get an F, right? Let's say growing up, you get an F, you're like, oh, well, thanks. That place sucks, right? So you're like, depending on what happens, either you're getting the reward and something's being added, or you're like, what if you take away something? Can you modify people's behavior if you remove something? Sure. Example would be like if I told my son, like, hey, my son's name is Christian, like, hey, do your homework. He's like, I don't want to do my homework. Do your homework and I'll give you ice cream. I will add ice cream to your life. Well, no, I mean, that's a really good example. That's the second part. So the first part is add something to someone to change behavior. You'll give me ice cream? Yes. I'll do my homework. Right? Change behavior. You're like, okay. You said take away the phone. Yeah, you do your homework, take away your phone, tablet, something, and then like, that's negative reinforcement, removing something, right? To modify it. And then the last part is really punishment. Punishment is like, okay, you get a whooping, right? Like, get a beating. But then you have to kind of question, like, very good point. Right? So most behaviors believe that punishment does not modify behavior. So then you have the question like, well, does the prison system work? Obviously, prison is a punishment. In some ways, negative reinforcement. And we're gonna take away society and freedom from it. We don't like that. In the hopes that we think you don't be a criminal anymore. Right? So, yeah, but then kind of like, what else can they do in the prison system? Solitary confinement, take away the light, take away the sound. So like that's punishment, right? Because punishment would be anything that's kind of an aversive stimulus, anything that really like makes you feel torturous, a beating, right? Actual torture, restricting freedom, right? Putting you in complete darkness. Anything that can physically be aversive. You're like, will that work? Man, usually it doesn't. Usually it doesn't. If anything, prison systems exacerbate criminality. It's like college. Criminals, right? I know how to take all those locks. I know how to do things well. How do you move drugs? Move heroin? How do you move cocaine? Who's your connection? Right? You basically breed more sociopathy, more sociopath. Okay, so, but think of this concept, like, wow, okay, so that's the case where we program human beings' minds. And with that information, you can say you can manipulate it. Very easily, because we have to say, okay, Dr. Archie saying, okay, you add something, but depending on what you add, how strong that stimulus is, you can get better results. It can be a weak stimulus, right? Strong. Christian, I'll give you guys Christian, I'll take it to Disney. Two different stimulus. One will make you do all the work in the world, right? Disney was a lot more strong. more stimulus than just ice cream, right? So even from that parameter, you're kind of like, well, how does this translate into the greater society? Like, it translates to everything. You meet someone, and they know these concepts very well. Say they're sociopaths like that. They're like, oh, human beings respond to positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement. Let me bring flowers on the first day. Let me do this on the first day. Take you out and love bomb, right? Let me love bomb. And we know that the behavior is to follow the reward. So now you want to be closer to that person, right? You want more of it, right? You want more of the stuff. If you take it away, let's say it goes to everywhere. Your mind goes into chaos. But this makes no sense. How can they want to give you more of the good stuff than you just give me? I will do whatever they want me to do so that I can give you more good stuff. And this is how we continue to manipulate. And even say in employment, like, okay, let's say you guys are Gen Z, right? Right, maybe below you under that. And you're like, okay, how do I get younger people to show up to work more often? You're like, well, younger people don't respond in the same way they do, say, my age group. So say my age group, you're like, hey, we can get paid every 2 weeks. You're like, that's good, but younger people, maybe their attention span has been conditioned a certain way, that they want to get paid more frequently. And if they don't, they might quit the job. So you could be working at, say, at Portillo's or Wendy's or wherever, and they may come up with a concept like, how about we let the young people cash out after every shift? So that they can go by their Shein and their Temu and their shoes and their cute little outfits. That would be reinforcement to make them show up to work and do a good job. So you're like, you can schedule the reinforcement. Like, let's not make it 2 weeks, let's make it every day. And now we've changed and modified human behavior. We've taught you something to expect something. Right? And with that expectancy, your behavior will follow. Right, so these are kind of the theories on how human beings learn or be conditioned. Right? Because we're kind of like computer programs. Like, how are you doing the program? What are you using to program? Same thing would go with just say school, like, hey, definitions, concepts, how can I apply it to real life? How do I understand the whole umbrella of the field of psychology? Like, it depends, it's a process. It's a process of programming. And so that you need to learn. Some people get it quicker, some people don't get it as fast because there's different methods. You may say like, oh man, it's a horrible professor. Why? Right? Because they didn't make the topic relatable. And I'm not going to understand if I can't relate in a personal way, right? Because if not, it's just an abstract definition, an abstract concept. I'm like, I don't know, it's going to take me a long time to understand what's going on, right? And then you might get a good professor, and they're like, hey, you know, even on the exams, I made everything personal, right? Because the most effective thing is to make it personal. If you have to just say fill in a blank or multiple choice, that just requires memory. Short term, you just got to remember how to place something there, or remember what the concept is. But it don't mean that you'll remember it all. You may never remember outside of that exam, right? You need to know it for exam. But if you make something personal, then it goes into long-term memory because it's part of your story of your life. And that will kind of stick with you a lot more. So I'm not a big believer in multiple choice or fill in the blanks because that's just short-term working memory. I'm interested in like applying psychology to personal life. So if I know you can apply to personal life, then completely make sense of the concepts for that. Okay. All right, so we say, hey, learning is an experience. Spirit just make a link. Like, okay, what's a car? Four wheels, right? Something else could be a car. Right? We go, yeah, cars are a little different. In my mind, in my categories of cars, you have your schemas, your construct cars, category cars. And I'm like, well, okay, because maybe that should be a car. You're like, yeah, that should be it's a car, but it's different. Right? I can associate four wheels, steering wheel, all this to car, but it's still different, but it's still part of it, right? So we link things together, right? And we have responses based on those links. All right, and then we got cognitive learning, right? Here we're trying to understand things, or know things, or anticipate, or otherwise make use of information-rich higher mental process. All of that to say is we're trying to understand the world around us using some sort of links to other things that we already previously experienced. So you're kind of building or scaffolding things in your mind, right, based on other things that you already know in some way. So that's how you kind of come up to new definitions, new concepts, and ways to do things. You know, like navigating yourself around the world. Like, oh, remember this block, make a love. Oh yeah, there's a thing on the corner, right? You see the Popeyes thing, right? Right? You're linking all these things in your mind so that you get to an end goal, right? But if you take some other streets you've never experienced, you're like, now lost. I have no previous experience to help guide me towards my goal. Right? The phones are kind of made simple here, right? But take that off. Also, too, think of like ChatGPT, AI, Gemini, like it's impacting our learning in a deep way. How so? What do you think? How do you feel that artificial intelligence is changing some of these things when it comes to learning? You kind of really don't have to. Yeah, see, we can maybe know something because of the AI, but it doesn't mean we understand it, right? Yeah, you just get a little glimpse of info, right? Because we say the understanding is long-term memory, it's permanent. Remember, you can understand it, you can relate it to a personal experience. So I think we're kind of taking away deep learning and just making surface level. Surface level information. All right, but this is important. We do need to understand, know, and anticipate because we need to predict. The human mind is made to predict the next second, the next 5 seconds, tomorrow, right? And if you can't predict, there's an unknown. And if there's an unknown, there's stress. People want prediction. And you're not going to have perfect prediction, but I need to know that the school will be here tomorrow when I show up. That's a good prediction, right? The school didn't just give you all numbers. Right? And even think about this when it comes to personal relationships. Right? So for the woman in class, so what's probably one of your biggest complaints with a man's communication, if you're like getting to know him? Like, what would be one of your number one complaints? The way that they communicate. Okay, and how would you get to know him? Yeah, but you would need a lot of information, right? So you're like, I need a lot of if I don't see you respond, you're like, I still don't know if this person understand what I'm saying. Right? Something, a head nod, or yeah, I get what you're saying, something, right? So you want a response, right? And you're part of the environment. You're throwing stuff out there to stimulate, to see if there's a response. So you don't get a response, you're like, I'm still confused. I don't know if this person gets it. If I understand. But probably one of the most other important things is consistency.
Yeah, that too.
Right? Because you say like, hey, if a person communicates with you every day for a week and then just drops off, and then they want to come back 2-3 days later, you're like, you're too random. I can't predict what you're about, your intentions, anything. You give me stress, right? You give me stress. And like, I don't want stress. I like things that are predictable. Right? So we do kind of have value for prediction, but maybe sometimes we don't. Sometimes we do like the mystery, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of balance, right? But you don't want to be too mysterious because anyway, that's right.
Right, I need my surprises. Like, that's how bad I don't even want to be surprised. Because I didn't know. That's like, oh, no, like, that's just how it is.
Yeah, we're all different in that way, right? Like some of us love more prediction than others, right? And some of us maybe don't need it as much. But yeah, and so like, hey, that we use that so that we can anticipate. And anticipate is part of information, and information is important. We are concerned about information. Is the information something that is helpful? Is the information irrelevant? Is it useless? And guess what? If it's useless and irrelevant, or if that circuitry in your brain, those wires, those neurons just start to prune like branches. Let me get rid of this. I'm not gonna do it. Okay, so now we get into more of the theories of classical and operating conditioning. So, a few things we need to know. We talked about reinforcement. We said reinforcement is reward. But rewards drive behavior. So anything that either drives behavior in a positive way or a negative way is a reinforcement. Any event that increases the probability that a response will occur. Right? So you're like, will it elicit a response in some way? Will I present something in some way and there's a reaction? Right? That is a reinforcement. But also too, antecedents and events that precede a response. More important classical conditioning. So think about this, a drug addict. Let's say we're working with a drug addict, right? We're doing some sort of intervention or therapy for a drug addict. What do we need to know? What do you think we need to know when we're working with a drug addict? Like what? Throw out some things. So we need to know emotional stability. Erratic. Like, why are you so random? Why are you random? What else do you think we need to know? Like, what about the environment do you think we need to know for a drug? What about the environments? Is that an important part? Yeah, and that's important information now. So one of them is antecedents. We're like, wait, before you do drugs, what are you experiencing in your mind or what is in the environment? Is there something in the environment that triggers like, okay, go get my brain? Right? Is something that triggers? Is there a sound? Is it something visual? Is it something that triggers in your mind to say, now is the time? environment makes you do anything? What in the environment makes you do any and everything? Is it the lights? Is it the sound? Is it something? You're like, oh, I'm on TikTok. We want to understand what happened before you went on TikTok. Something created a urge to respond to go on TikTok. Something. Right? I was thinking about this, and that's what led me to do it. We want to understand what happened before. Then we can focus on behavior. What do you do on TikTok? What happened to you? Right? We can study that behavior, the actual behavior of using. And then we can study the consequence. Right? So we kind of call it ABC, antecedent. What happens before? What stimulated you to have the impulse, the reflex, the thought, the feeling? And then we study the behavior, and then we can study the consequence. What happens after the fact? Right? We want to learn all of that so that we can maybe change the variables, maybe change the consequence, change the antecedents, change the environment. Because you're like, what if, for example, you're like, hey, you know, someone who's an alcoholic, and then I want to ask the client that, well, whenever you decide to drink, what happens before you bite? But you know what? Whenever I come home and I relax for about 30, 40 minutes, I'm going to get a drink. Very interesting. Excellent information to know. What if we can introduce a different pattern for you to do so that you don't come directly home and just chill for 30, 40 minutes? Could we have you do something in between that time? Right? Could we give you some sort of task or activity? And then what you start to know is like, yeah, you're right. Now I don't have to have a drink for 2 hours. And then we say, could we make it 5 hours? We have to do something else. Right? Create a new pattern of behavior. If you go to the gym, right? Do something else. And then eventually the person can be like, hey, that really helps. I'm not drinking as much. Right? So like we want to understand what's happening before so that we can help it before behavior. Okay. But this can be applied kind of immediately, right? So I just kind of described the difference. Pavlov's dog associated with bell, food, saliva, right? Bell means nothing until maybe dog knows his food comes out the bell. So even when food doesn't come out, when he hears a bell, it salivates. Stop bringing out food, maybe it stops salivating over a period of time. That's classic. And then operant was kind of that positive, negative reinforcement punishment. We'll talk about that in all Thursday when we get to classes. All right, say Evelyn Pavlov with the dog, right? So here's the terms we want to learn because this is important. This is probably things like the exam. We want to know 2 things. What's the stimulus? What's the response? Stimulus, response. Stimulus, response. Some things are not, some stimulus are neutral. Back to that bell, it said it means nothing to no one until you can condition to make it think it means something. So we'll start with this neutral stimulus. Stimulus that does not invoke a response. That fan sound in the background, no response will be meaningless. You hear it every day. You've been repeated to it, right? And in your mind, like it's not associated with anything that's interesting or stimulation. Okay? And like maybe every 20 seconds, if it gets some weird click to it, you might that's annoying. Right? You might not pay attention to it. And now we might say, we might be touching on it. Did you fix that? That's really annoying, right? The verse we'll have a response. But for now, we don't have a response. It's neutral. But if we say, hey, we could put a little weird noise every 10 seconds, you're like, hey, then we'll respond to it, right? And then we hear it over time. Now, every time, we kind of think a certain way about it. We think about, if we hear just a clicking sound, we might think about that annoying fan in the classroom at the university. Right? We've prepared in our brain something to the stimulus. All right, and then an unconditioned stimulus, right? We say stimulus innately capable of eliciting a response. So unconditioned just means unlearned or untrained, right? We didn't teach the dog anything yet, right? It hasn't been conditioned. Conditioned would be like, hey, we've exposed something to say the dog or the person to where we response. Say the dog salivated because it's hungry. Nobody talked about it. Right? We all may salivate when we get hungry. We call that maybe it's a reflex, something innate. Nobody can teach us that. You put your hand on a hot stove. You put the kid's hand on a hot stove. It pulls back. I gotta teach him how to pull back. You don't have to.
It's just a.
It's a unconditioned response, right? Something natural, innate, right? Maybe we want to teach you to do something different. We can, right? The conditioned response is the part where we got to teach you something. We got to train you. So it's kind of like teaching the dog, right? You're like, all right, well, I'm going to give the dog a treat to try to get it to sit. And so you're like, okay. So what's the response from a dog going to be natural? Like you don't have to teach it. Well, it's going to respond to food.
Yeah.
It's going to respond to that. It's not the response that we want. Right? We want an ordered response. Right? They're like, well, what do? We have to say sit. Right? Or maybe we show the food. You're like, okay, I'm not getting enough. Quick enough results. What would we change to get quicker results? A more stronger result. What would change? Right? The question that I get out across, how big is the tree? Maybe we introduce a bigger tree. It might get a quicker response. Right? Like, well, how are you telling a dog to sit? Like, oh, I was telling it to sit. Like, maybe that's a weak stimulus. Well, yeah, you like maybe add some extra stuff. Like the stronger stimulus would be like sit, right? Or a point or something, right? So you're like, depending on the strength of the stimulus, you get different results.
Or a tone.
Yes, right? Because those are stronger stimulus. It can be weak or it can be strong.
Shut up.
Absolutely, right? Like strong response might initiate a quicker, strong stimulus might initiate a quicker response. So I can tell my son, I bet Christian, stop doing it. And he does it still. Like it's kind of a quick response. And then I scream, stop. And then he stops. And the observation that we were studying this behavior, you're like, well, yeah, the value was higher in your voice, right? And your expression was probably a little bit more aggressive and initiated a successful, quicker response than a weak one. No, just stop. Right? So this is important to kind of know because we want to know, like, all right, well, this is how people learn or people are conditioned. What are the variables we have to change to make things stronger response or quicker response? Right? You have to kind of change some of the stimulus in these situations. Okay, can you think of anything in your personal life where you feel that there's such a strong stimulus that it really changes your behavior either very quickly or it produces like very strong habits in your life? Like if there's something in your life that's so stimulating that it makes your behavior follow it very strongly in some way. Anything you can think of? It could be social media, anything that you're learning, other patterns of behavior. Think of any of your habits. Like why do you have that habit in the first place?
I would say,
It could be anything. You guys, oh, I like to chew gum.
I love to
Or somebody like, hey, I like to smoke, you know? Or anything, you know? Kind of like, well, tell me what is the stimulus that's providing you to have such a strong response to the stimulus? Like, could you? That's second.
For me, I would say, make me calm, like, all day. Because I have, I used to have really bad
hey, there's certain things that can be done that trigger me quick.
Yeah.
And so the next question would be, well, what exactly are they? And where did that come from? It has to come from something. And so one would kind of deduce that, oh, that's learned behavior, right? Learned behavior. There's an observation, you've been in that environment, you've been exposed, you've seen people do it, and you're like, you know what? My response might get the results that I want, which is don't trigger, which is back off, which is leave me alone, which is anything that you find to be the results, the goal that you want. And so that behavior will constantly follow and it gets the results. But if you're like, well, you know what? I don't know. Like you might go into an environment where people don't respond the same way. And there can be bad consequences. And then you might have to modify the behavior. Like what works in this environment may not work in this environment, right? So think about it. Let's say you go get a job and they pay you phenomenal. Like that paycheck is nice. But they do say some things that are trigger. Will you hold your tongue? Will you hold your tongue because of the money, the reinforcement, like, I can buy everything I want? Or would you do the normal, natural response, you're like, no, I'm gonna curse them out or something like that, right? Eventually, you have a pressure, right?
Eventually, but it's still, I get a pop. I just put in my 2 week notice.
Yes. But so even with that, you're like, hey, even thresholds changes. You're like, in this environment, I can take it 20 times before I blow up. In this environment, I can take it 1 time. Right? Because the consequences are different.
Exactly.
Right? So, anyone else can think of anything where it's like, I don't know, depending on the environment, the consequences, you just made me respond differently. You think of anything in that sense? Right? And therefore we say, hey, you know what? If you change the reward systems, you can change your behavior. You can augment it. Like depending on what you get paid, how much you get paid, just how much you care about the job, and how you can change your response to these things. If they're not paying you enough, you'll blow up. Quick. You can respond quick because you like the reward is actually not that great. Alright, some principles, just to kind of understand. We say, hey, we acquire things. We are all being trained, right? In a certain period, in conditioning when a response is strengthened. And so think of this, like in terms of learning, like, okay, we started out learning sounds as babies and kids. But we don't understand anything beyond that. From sounds, we started to make use of letters, so they started to teach us the alphabet. But we didn't learn anything beyond that. We didn't understand anything beyond that. From alphabet, we understand words. Now we get words. And now we can start to actually communicate and receive feedback a little bit. That was nice. Now from words, we could actually make full sentences and paragraphs. And now we feel good about that when we receive feedback. We broaden our knowledge and we've grown and expanded. That was nice. And now beyond that, you write full papers, right? And now you've grown and expanded your knowledge just by acquiring things, building kind of the system up, little by little. So you strengthen, you deepen your knowledge about just sounds. That went into letters, that went into words, that went into sentences, that went into paragraphs, that went into chapters, books, and now you may understand a total field at some point, just through that training period. Right? So then this class is kind of like a training period. Building up little stuff where, okay, I get that, and then maybe hopefully by the end of like, man, I can connect all the dots. Yeah, you're like, everything starts to make sense because you're connected. You're like, I don't understand things in just little blocks. I understand the whole circle. It has a circle, right? That's a complete circle. There you see the big picture. All right, responding reinforcement occurs when the unconditioned stimulus, that US, right? Unconditioned stimulus, bring forth a response which becomes associated with a conditioned stimulus. Kind of a reason. Said that the bail was unconditioned. At some point it wasn't being trained, but after a while we train it, and now it's some sort of conditioned response. The dog responds all the time to the bail. And then we have higher order, which I just kind of talked about, right? Kind of going through things and making them deeper by building on systems of things, right? We go from words to paragraphs to frameworks and models of how we're using things. Now, these are learning theories, right? This is kind of our most accepted understanding of how we learn, right? It's not the end all be all, right? Pavlov is just one explanation of how we learn. Some people say, okay, what about observational learning? Learn by observation. Right? And it's true, we've got those mirror neurons in our brain for us to mimic and copy. Okay, that deals in every word. I want to let that person. Let them do what they do, let's see if they got it right. That's just observational learning. That's different than even classroom. But some other different kind of viewpoints on classical conditioning, right? The cognition part, kind of thinking part, right? It says that, hey, you know what? We're just informational organisms looking for association among things, so that we naturally move through the world as organisms, and we're just looking for things that make sense, that we can relate one thing to the next. When they do, we learn it, and we keep moving on and expanding that, right? That we're just nothing but informational organisms. And that we also have this expectancy kind of viewpoint. Expectation about how events are interconnected, right? Once again, we're predictive creatures, so we want to put things together so we know what to expect at all times, right? To the best of our abilities. We want to make sense of things so that nothing's left to the unknown. Hopefully. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So remember, when you start to make these connections, it's like you've been training, you train a child how to ride a bike. You like to ride a bike requires several steps. There's pedals, there's handles, there's seat, there's coordination. It requires building up. And then the person finally does it, the child does it, it goes off, you can, right? 28 times. There's a lot of theories on this. The number of times it takes to learn something. A lot of people say 20, a lot of people say, depending on what it is, 21 times. Let's say it's a word. If you repeat the word 21 times, you will remember the word forever. Because of the ones who learn. Yes, right? So the different kind of theories on it. You're like, you're like, yeah, I really need to remember that for the test tomorrow. Somebody like, well, we did it 20 times. Right? May work, may not. We're all different kind of memory systems that we use, right? But guess what? If you say, you know what? Once again, Dr. Ross said, if you make it personal, it's a stronger sort of response you have to it, a stronger stimulus too. Because personal is emotional, and anything emotional, that's you. Anything emotional is strong because it's part of your memory. You think about it relating to some trauma or something positive, or you're extremely happy, you're going to remember that in a very strong way. It requires no effort, right? The long-term memory requires no effort. still there somewhere. So it could be something that we can reintroduce you, and not only take you 3 times to get back to knowing it completely. You're like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah. So that's what we call spontaneous recovery, reappearance of learning response following apparent extinction. So going back to the love bomb, right? Think about that. We said the strength of the stimulus. Like, oh, I met somebody and they were weak. They didn't excite me. They're not exciting, right? But if you meet somebody they're excited, like, oh, that's a strong stimulus. It elicits a strong response out of you. I feel emotional about it. And then they disappear, ghost. They come back maybe a couple months later. They want to be back in your life. You're like, I don't know because I don't like the unknown. You're unknown, very random. Give me stress. But I did like how you make me feel. And I remember how you made me feel. It went away soon. And they will reintroduce themselves in life and bring back that excitement that you remember, and they reappear. So you have a spontaneous recovery of how good you felt when you loved them. Right? So that could be the thing. Now I'm telling you, if you understand these concepts very strong, the psychopaths and the sociopaths and the narcissists and the Machiavellian types of power, they understand these systems. And so that just means human beings can be easily manipulated. Right? You give the right reinforcement, you say the right stuff at the right time, you can make people crave. Want more, right? You can make people sad. You can do whatever you want to do, or you can just confuse people. So this is good information to know, because we're no different than any other organism, no different than training the rats or the worms or the bird. We're no different. Yes. The question is, why would people love Bob? Anybody have their kind of explanations? Why do you think somebody would love Bob? What would be the reasoning behind it? That you love Bob unconsciously. Now remember this, we said this reward system, behavior follows reward. So they're getting something, or you're getting something by doing love bomb. Just like the other person on the flip side gets something by getting love bomb. Usually this, we like the response. So if you make somebody happy and feel good, the strongest response anybody can, according to kind of our understanding, the strongest response anybody can get is charity. Giving to somebody is such a deeper response than just taking. Yeah. It's like McDonald's. Like, yeah, I want to give you McDonald's quick, now my stomach hurt, and I gotta get some more fast food. It don't last long. You need more. But giving is such a deeper thing. It kind of stays. That on the flip side, so the person who's doing it, they like the fact that they're giving to someone, but then they also like the fact that they receive praise. Oh my gosh, you make me feel so great. It boosts self-esteem, self-worth, motivation. But here's the trick. Yes, and for men equal, right? So, and we're kind of built off of our identity is related to how we provide and do things. So our identity is related to how people kind of praise us for the feedback that we receive from us. To make us feel more. But in general speaking, you well, that praise is a reward. But here's the thing, that praise won't last all the time. So then you have to move to a new victim. if you see something funny, rewarding in some way, you're like, I'm gonna watch the next video. And then you watch 5 videos, you're like, okay, these suck. And then you get off the app.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, I'm bored. And bored is a stressor. Bored is stressful. Boredom is stressful. Boredom is like a form of depression.
Yeah.
You're like, no.
It's the worst.
Yeah. And so with boredom, you're like, I gotta do something to solve this boredom. Let me go see something entertaining, stimulating on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and what's going on. You start to do that to reward your brain from boredom. And then it becomes boring because you're saying the same stuff and then you get off. Right? Same kind of mechanism. So it can be applied in so many ways. But yeah, so this was classical conditioning we talked about today with Pavlov's dog and that kind of theory. Next class we'll talk about operant, which is really that reward system. We'll get really deep into that. But yeah, that's it for today. And I'll put up another discussion today, so look out for that. Try to get your replies